Hi everybody, this is Hero from the Birds, back with another Shadowlands video, and I'm here with a PUG in The Other Side +8 to show you our Holy Shaman, or the Elemental Healing Shaman. So this is where we come into a Mythic Plus as the healing role, but we're playing as an Elemental Shaman with a couple of tools that help us to keep our group going while also pumping out tons and tons of damage. If you like a build like, Holy Paladin, Venthyr, where you have huge Ashen Hallows with massive Hammer of Wraths, this is kind of the same type of style, meaning you're running at this from a damage perspective and you're hoping to cover enough healing throughout the rest of the dungeon. I know +8 is basically a really baby key in general, but I wanted to just show you this as a proof of concept, and also because I haven't switched to the ideal Covenant setup yet, so I didn't want to go too deep before I switch over. Now, let me show you what it is that makes this work and why I think it actually could be pretty viable going forward as just a fun spec to play with your friends, something to add extra damage and punch through some higher keys. It begins with the legendary Chains of Devastation. This does two main things for you. On the one hand, it makes your chain heal convert your chain lightning into an instant cast with 50% more damage. And it also allows your chain lightning casts to convert your chain heal into instant cast and cost no mana. Both are essential for this build to work because you spend most of your time going back and forth between casting chain heals and chain lightnings. And what makes it work actually is the fact that your chain heals are going to be free. You can only, as a alternate or a DPS player, use up to somewhere like 4 healing spells if you're a Ret Paladin, or if you're surging as an enhanced shaman or an elemental shaman. You can only press it about 4 times before you run out of mana. What Chains of Devastation allows you to do is infinitely keep up the combination of chain heal and chain lightning. Now in AoE, giving 50% buff to chain lightning, one of our strongest spells for this purpose, is really, really solid. So this is just a really good legendary in general, though it's obviously outshined as a DPS player by something like Echoes of the Great Sundering, or maybe even the elemental build that reduces the CD on it with Flame Shock casts. But for our purposes, this 50% bonus is actually significant because it works with Stormkeeper, and it's just good damage all around if you're doing large pulls, or if you have to deal with Fortified on higher keys and you need to really punch through a lot of damage before all of the mobs whack you and destroy you. Here we're on a non-fortified, so we're on Tyrannical, and it's just a nice place to check out on a lower key whether we can keep up with the throughput. So you'll see over the course of this video all 4 bosses, and I'll talk through what I'm thinking about during each of them. But in general, this build begins by making use of Chains of Devastation to help prop up our healing. And we combine that with a few talent choices and a few conduit choices to make it even more potent. The main pieces for the build are Echoing Shock, Earth Shield, and Ancestral Guidance. These are the things that actually make it work or functional. The rest is to fill in the gaps and to work with what's left over for our kit. So let me talk about the central pieces first, and then I'll work back over the rest of the talents as you watch Hakar. So Echoing Shock is necessary because outside of our chain heal spam, we don't have a way to offer a kind of throughput bump outside of big CDs. And so we need something that'll help us kind of bridge the gap when people take a reasonable amount of AoE damage and they need a couple of shots to keep them going, rather than us blowing an entire CD or using a trinket to save one person's life. And Echoing Shock fits the bill. In fact, Echoing Shock will duplicate a lot of our spells, but all of them only at a vanilla level. And Chain Heal is by far and away the best target for this ability. Our Stormkeepered Chain Lightnings will not proc a bonus. This doesn't work with Master of the Elements with Lava Burst, for example. It will work with Earthquake, but only a vanilla version. For those of you who know the Echoes of the Great Sundering builds, it doesn't really do that much more for you using it with Echoing Shock. However, Echoing Shock with Chain Heal converts a really high potency throughput button into a doubling of itself. So having this on a 30-second CD is really handy for covering those in-between moments when you need to top off the group, but you don't have access to a big CD. Earth Shield's the other central piece to this, because Earth Shield allows us to do significant tank healing with Chain Heal. Earth Shield provides 20% bonus healing from us to the target of the Earth Shield, and it also gives you a little bit of a passive heal whenever the target gets hit. So the passive heal part is kind of minimal, but the 20% bonus healing part is really what makes this thrive. It actually is going to convert all of the other healing to the 2 targets that Chain Heal splashes to, so it's just a beneficial thing all the way around, and there's some conduits that help to prop it up as well. So we like Earth Shield here to keep our tank going. And then we have Ancestral Guidance, which is the third major necessary piece to make this build work alongside Chains of Devastation. And then Ancestral Guidance, as you'll see here, helps us to convert all of our damage and all of our healing into splash to 3 targets. What this basically does is allow us to have our own healing cooldown. And when you pair this together with Stormkeeper, when you pair this together with Echoing Shock Chain Heals, you will instantly top off your group. You can also put this together with some of the Covenant, like, Chain Harvest or the Night Fae ability, and you'll also instantly top your group as well. So just a really important button to have as an emergency, or as something to plan around for your pridefuls, that kind of stuff. 2 minutes, and you're good to go for about 10 seconds. Now, the other pieces fill in the back. Earthen Rage is chosen as a passive option because we don't cast a lot of lava bursts. Storm Elemental is chosen in part because it's just a passive button that goes alongside with our Elemental. And the Fire Totem isn't really that good for AoE because things move out of it, or we kite, or that kind of stuff. Primal Elemental similarly is just solid because we don't make a lot of use of our Ice Fury. It's just not that good because we build up a lot of extra GCD usage that we really can't afford, and it doesn't provide us any extra healing. So we just put all of our marbles into a big elemental that smashes bosses, or especially for Storm Elemental is really solid in AoE. Remember, it's going to basically lower the GCD of our instant cast Lightning Bolt, so we get out of Lightning Bolt and get 2 Chain Heals slightly faster when Storm Elemental is out after we build it up. But that's a really minor detail. Obviously, Stormkeeper is chosen because it is one of the best abilities to synergize with the rest of our kit. As I mentioned, it obviously makes use of the 50% bonus that Chain Heal is going to offer, so you can weave between each Stormkeeper cast a Chain Heal. You can go Stormkeeper, Chain Heal, Stormkeeper, and get massive overload damage from all of those abilities, since the Stormkeeper buff basically allows for an instant overload on every target hit by the Chain Lightning. In any case, it's pretty solid stuff overall, and it's just better than Ascendance, which sort of pulls us out of our gameplay style to focus more on Lava Burst, and obviously the passive benefit. We don't really need that much Mastery and Haste interaction. Given that, how does this playstyle actually work out? Well, in general, we need a couple of other pieces to make this work. The main one being the Trinket, Tuft from the boss, Sun King. We use this Trinket because what we lack is a kind of external CD that you would normally get from a healing class, like Pain Suppression or Guardian Spirit or Bark Skin, that kind of stuff. We don't have access to that as a Shaman in general, so it kind of hurts. But Tuft is really solid. You saw me use it on the mage earlier. I think I use it on someone else a little bit later, just as a button to save someone's life who's in mortal danger. Really solid and kind of core to this piece. The second thing is the playstyle. So on boss fights, you're going to try to focus a lot of your damage up front and keep your Lava Burst going, while moving back and forth between your Chain Heals to keep targets up or your Chain Lightnings. And then outside of that, for tyrannical boss fights, what you're really looking to do is manage your CDs. So you're going to have access to AG, which is a nice 10-second window of burst that's going to keep everyone going. And you'll likely, if you're playing Night Fae or if you're playing Venthyr, have access to one other use, or maybe 2 uses depending on the CD, of a burst healing cooldown that'll help you out. So you need to plan around those things, and most fights, I think, are reasonable in that you can keep yourself going with your echoing shock chain heals outside of those two windows, and then when things are really hectic, you can make use of them. And as a 2-minute CD, they're actually not too bad. So here you see in a tyrannical boss fight scenario, we get some pressure here, and I think I'm misplaying it a little bit with the CD use. And obviously I'm Kyrian, so I have access to one of the worst Covenant abilities. But nevertheless, we're able to manage our CDs and get through it in a reasonable amount of time. We're also only doing about 1.7k DPS, and this is a fight where it's kind of healer intensive. Usually the healer's the one that tracks down the robots too, so there's a lot of improvement that can be made there just by being a little more efficient with my time. Using Spirit Walker's Grace at a better time so that I can get more lava bursts off for damage, that kind of stuff. But you guys get the basic idea is there. Using your Echoing Shock with chain heals and then filling in with your burst healing cooldowns as needed. As we move along here to other portions of the dungeon, you'll notice some of the value of the burst damage that is offered by your elemental shamans in general. And I think, again, that's the main takeaway for me. Like a holy paladin, except from leaning in from the DPS side, you can offer just a ton of options for your team to deal with mechanics, whether it's prideful or a really difficult fortified pack. Earthquake has a lot of extra value in that it can always knock down a lot of these mobs. And I just think if you have enough healing, your dungeons are really dictated by how much damage you can do and how fast you can push it. So having 4 DPSers ultimately gives you the option to move pretty fast through it. You can see here we're just topping everybody off with the use of AG. Those 2 overloaded lightning bolts or chain lightnings going off, just doing truckloads of healing. I think we pushed up to around 6 or 7 burst healing. You can do quite a bit more if you're non-Kyrian. And that's another thing to sort of talk about as we move into this next section. On the Conduit side, there's a couple of interesting options. If you're going to be going Venthyr or Night Fae, I think the best options tend to be the Covenant choice. So the Chain Harvest one that increases the critical strike chance, which basically gives you more CDR, and also the Night Fae one, which is going to essentially give you straight up CDR, like 25 to 28 seconds off of the cast. One of the things that's interesting about crit for this build, which I recommend as a secondary stat, is something like Chain Harvest gets a lot of value out of crit, not just because of CDR, but because of our passive Fury, which is going to make all of our critical strikes do 250% critical effect rather than 200%. That's true for both the healing side and the damage side of Elemental Shaman. So if you have huge crits coming out from Chain Harvest, they're going to do that much more throughput on both sides, topping the group entirely, also doing a ton of damage to the pull, and giving you good CDR. So Critical Strike has a lot of value for Venthyr specifically, but in general, just for the healing throughput that you might need for an Elemental Shaman doing this kind of a build. I would recommend, though, if you can do it, playing Night Fae, in part because you get the value of a ranged AoE button that you can press, channeled for 3.5 seconds, that then gives you a little bit of flexibility for its use on the healing side, both sides of which can be poured into your AG window if you need it, but also can be separated out. So you can start, for example, a pull, you can hit AG and do some chain lightnings. You can finish off at the end of AG by doing all of the damage side of it, by casting it. And then you have a huge amount of burst healing that just went out through your Ancestral Guidance, but also you will have access to an immense amount of burst healing that you can do. And I think it just gives you a little more flexibility than Chain Harvest, because sometimes you'll just need to press Chain Harvest to top people off, but there's not very many mobs present. And the single target from the Night Fae is really strong on bosses. So that's what I'm looking forward to testing a little bit more on some of the higher keys once I switch back over. For this key, obviously, I'm just doing Kyrian to test it out as well. As far as the conduits are concerned, on both scores, if you're not going to be using the Covenant ones for Venthyr or Night Fae, I'd suggest using the ones that give your Earth Shield a more bonus effect. I think that's the one I'm running right now in this dungeon. It goes up to something like 10% increased effect, which is really strong because your chain heals hitting those, hitting the Earth Shield target is going to mean that you get that much more value pouring into your group. Essentially turns your chain heal into something like a 12 to 14k heal when it crits. Some of you will have more gear than I do, so sometimes even higher than that. And that's all splashing. In addition to that, you can take the one that makes chain heal hit harder on the initial target, which is also really, really strong. And both of these feed into the idea of helping to stabilize your tank, which is exactly what you need for this build to be functional in higher keys. Again, largely, we haven't even made use of some of the other tools that we bring as a shaman, things like Tremor Totem, things like Cap Totem, things like Earth Elemental, all of which I didn't really use too much in this dungeon. Our ranged interrupt is exceptional as well, so we have lots of tools to offer the group. And even though there is the deficiency of not having a magic dispel, I think by and large, it's negated by the awesome AoE damage that we offer and some of these other tools to help manage the group. So I could have used Earth Elemental, for example, on the previous pull, which was a little sketchy. I decided to commit Ancestral Guidance instead, and I think it ends up messing up my plan for Zyxa, but we'll see. And I can talk a little bit about what happens in this pull and how we can manage it with other tools. So opens pretty good. We want to get our Flame Shot going and just Lava Burst, and then we're going to be cycling back and forth between the two of these. Again, this is largely because we want to continually press our free chain heals because we need the throughput healing in general for a fight like this. Then we commit ourselves to AG just to top the group off before the bomb goes off. And we're in a fairly healthy position at about the halfway point. But here's where we would really love to make use of Fae Transfusion and then hold it for another 10 seconds before this next piece comes off. People are starting to get arcing light built up over time, and it would be nice to be able to hit the button right about now and completely top the group before the end of the encounter. In this case, we only have access to the Kyrian ability, which is going to mean that we fall behind. And even though we're pumping out about 3.6k HPS, we could be up somewhere around 4.5 or 5k HPS in addition to our contribution on the damage side. And more to the point, we could probably punch out even more damage if we didn't have to focus so many chain heals and we knew that we could rely on our use of the Fae Transfusion. I think this is kind of similar for Chain Harvest if we were playing Venthyr as well. In any case, only a couple of deaths, and that was really just a mistake on my part of using Ancestral Guidance on the hill when I could have made use of the Earth Elemental. So things like that will be important if you're thinking about your own CDs. And again, it comes up again for Muzala, just how to manage these things for some of these tyrannical bosses. But guys, for Fortified Week, I'm anticipating that this Shaman is going to be quite strong, given that Earthquakes will have a lot more uptime on the mobs, and given that your burst CDs will be cycled back for each of the packs as you go through. If the boss damage and the boss difficulty is not that high, it makes you be able to cruise through with some of these things, and the extra damage from the Elemental Shaman is really quite excellent. So here we get going on Muzala. We again want to try to do our best to hold off on the use of our Ancestral Guidance until it's actually really important. So we're looking for big bursts of damage that come out and hit the group before we commit to it. I think I start committing to it fairly soon because I know we're going to be transitioning, and just I want to make sure everyone's topped off. I'm a little bit scattered here about where I want to go, so there are a lot of mistakes going off here, including myself getting hit by it. But that's okay. I'm still learning the build and getting used to it. And then I make some critical errors when we move over to do the second portion, or the phase 2 of Muzala. Again, one of the problems of this build is I have macroed focus targets for my Earth Shield and for my Chain Heal. So when I try to go back and forth between the two, if I'm not moused over a target, my Chain Heal is not going to go off. And so I essentially lost out on a lot of damage, enough damage to kill this Shade for sure, because I was improperly making use of my abilities, you can see here. I'm kind of upset at myself that I did not get that done. In any case, the group I'm with is doing fine, and then we just kind of blow up the boss and move on to the second phase really quickly so that we can get it out. But it's another opportunity to kind of see how we might manage some of these abilities, including even the Kyrian one, how to keep pumping out damage and keep yourself mobile despite all of the needs of the group. You can see in some of these instances, I shocked my my chain heal there. You can cast your chain heal at targets who are on the non-tank in a fight like Musala because people are pretty spread out, and it's usually okay, right? Here goes AG again. It's come back around for the fight. Another good example, and then all we have to do is keep topping off the group, and off we go. We still have Tuft available if we need it. And notice there, guys, the use of shock on that chain heal just to make sure everyone was completely topped off. A really solid usage overall, and again, something I would recommend if you're going to be playing this build. My team takes out the last one. We get back to it, and I think this ends up being a +2 or something like that. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, I'm not suggesting this is an earth-shattering build. I just think it's something really hilarious to play with, and it seems to do a really solid damage. So for those of you looking to test out some new builds, welcome to the Holy Shaman. Hope you enjoyed. We'll catch you guys again next time.